Hello, and welcome again to Playmakers Alley. Today we're going to look to talk about principles, and what we're going to look to focus on is what are principles, why should they matter, why should you consider them, some examples of them, and then briefly touch on an alternative to principles. So when it comes to principles, I'm not going to lie to you guys. It's a relatively abstract concept, but stick with me, and as we continue progress on our journey, it will become more and more clear as to why it matters. So principles are essentially an ideology which, when applied within the concept of American football, or within the concept of scenarios within American football, regular scenarios that occur within American football, they quickly convert to a methodology that allows you to implement some form of thing. And what that essentially means is that you don't need to account for every single parameter and variable in order to run stuff effectively against it, assuming that you understand the principles. So to simplify that, for example, let's say there are pass concepts people run in American football where they throw the ball, a set of people are running in different directions and they're trying to space themselves out in order to do that. There are a variety of ways of doing that. If you apply a principle, once you understand the principle, whatever the ideology is, regardless of the variety of concepts that are being run, you have a means of reasonably defending against it. And one thing about principles is that it's give and take. It's give and take. Like, if you're living by a principle, it has flexibility in that, okay, cool, I don't have to know exactly what's going to run or what they're showing me, or I might see something unexpected and I can defend against it because we're all on the same page. But at the same time, although I can defend against it, there's the allowance because there's no flexibility in the principle. Now, why does it matter? Why do principles matter? And I'm going to predominantly focus, as I've said in earlier videos, on the British game. Why does it matter? Now, I think that there's a case where it's often mistaken that the British game can be a semblance or directly correlated and taught in a similar way to the American game. And what I mean by that is that, like, there's vast difference. One, a lot of the talent that plays in the British game, although this is now changing, predominantly start picking up the sport when they're about 18, 19, some a little bit later, but essentially at university is when they start picking it up. Not younger. It's not like in America where you're learning it at 4, 5 years old. Also, it's a predominantly amateur scene. In fact, it's a wholly amateur scene. Now, what does that mean practically? Practically, that means that you don't have the time to dedicate to it because you have other things pulling your time, namely a job. So you don't have the amount of time that you might dedicate or you might see dedicated to it in America, such as like training 3, 4, 5 times a week, being able to basically build a life around that, particularly like, let's say, if you're in college. That's not something that's possible here. Now, why does this play into principles? This plays into principles because although principles are difficult to initially pick up and understand, once you understand the principle, it is very rapid what your growth can be, because you're not having to describe or show your players every single scenario they might come up against. Now, generally in the British game, like you will only see a relative select few amounts of concepts generally, and there's always like a flavor of the year sort of set of concepts. But what you've got to remember is that the goal should be, particularly if you're only just starting to play the sport at 18, 19, or maybe even, let's say, 16, 17, you're still well behind our contemporaries, is to be as good as you can be, not just be good enough for where you are. And that's where principles come into its own. Essentially, principles, although they have a higher difficulty in initially understanding them, if you understand them and then apply them, you're able to get good and grow a lot faster than utilizing the alternative and in a shorter space of time, which is necessary, particularly if you have aspirations of going towards Europe, going out towards playing for the national program, or even traveling further abroad. Now, one thing I will say about principles, personally, I'm a defensive-minded person. I play predominantly defense. Principles are very much more applicable, or the way in which I would utilize is more applicable to defense, although it can be used to offense, but there's a little bit more nuance in that, in the sense that offenses generally have agency. And what I mean by that is that offenses are the ones that set the tone, they snap the ball, they know exactly what they're running, while defenses to a degree are reactive to it. And because of that agency, they have to be particularly precise in what they're doing, especially in the pass game. But it can be applied to both. So essentially what I've gone through for you at the moment is, what is a principle and why does it matter? Simply, a principle is an ideology that, when applied to scenarios in the context of American football, converts into a methodology that means that you don't have to account for every single variable to be able to run stuff effectively. And the benefit of that, to surmise very quickly, is essentially, in the short amount of time you have in terms of picking up the game and wanting to get good quickly, if you understand it, then you're able to catapult your growth very fast. The downside to it is that it's a little bit more difficult, or I'd say abstract, to understand. Now, examples of principles. Now, in terms of, I'll give example for coaching, fan and playing. Predominantly, it will likely be defensively. Well, for example, for the fans, the principal reason or principle in which many fans go and then watch the sport is for fun. Now, fun is the idea or the ideology. When that comes to now going and watching the sport, fun is different form to many different people. Some might make the assumption that fun is literally the game, going there and seeing the game, seeing the intricacies of the game, being a hardcore fan of the game. That's not necessarily fun for everybody. Some people rock up just for the tailgate or just for the drinks in the party. Some people rock up for the vibes that are there at the scene, at the stadium, or to interact with people, or to just see a bunch of guys going at it, even though they have no idea what's going on. Guys or girls going at it, even though they have no idea what's going on, because they like the collision aspect of the sport. So the principle there is fun, and how it permeates differs depending on what is fun to you. By the end of the day, we're all enjoying it and enjoying the different aspects to it, and it's what makes us come back. From a coach's viewpoint, a principle, and this one's relatively simple, is often you might have, talking defensively or just generally, you have a principle in terms of what sort of defense you might want to build. Is it that you want to build fast and nimble defense? Or do you want to build a very strong and stout defense, acknowledging that on the principle that if it's a strong and stout defense, you might want much larger guys, people that are immovable, can't do much, but you acknowledge that if that's the case, they might not be as quick sideline to sideline. But for what you're wanting to run, strong and stout is what you're looking for, rather than fast and nimble. And the opposite of fast and nimble, if you have fast and nimble, you might have some smaller guys. Let's say that you don't have size in certain areas, but they're able to go sideline to sideline. They're able to swarm to the ball. They're able to move very quickly. And that is the principle of the defense. And because you have that principle, either the fast and nimble or the strong and stout, now what that means is that you don't have to define, okay, I need them to be 6'3". I need them to be able to run a 4.4. I need them to be able to bench 200 kg or whatever the case may be. Because ultimately what you're looking for is that, are they, for example, let's say strong and stout, are they movable? Are they able to take on a double team? Are they able to fill a gap or fill a hole? If they can do these things, the particular intricacies as to their measurables aren't relevant to me. So that's the principle. And then from a player viewpoint, prime example of a principle is once again talking defensively, would be in terms of, let's say, in terms of defending the run, the principles we are going to run out of are, we are going to be a one gap defense. I'll come on to gaps later on down the line, but we're going to basically play we're going to look to defend one small area defense per person, and we are going to look to defend in to out with certain players being primarily run first and certain players being primarily pass first. What does that effectively mean? That now means that, if we're going to be one gap defenders, what that means now is if the offense come out in a variety of formations, I don't have to explain to you every single formation that they might come out in. obviously based on our preparation, we'll assume they might come out in 3-4 formations. But if they show us something new, you know we are one gap or one area defenders. If they come out in a formation that has seven of them close together, in order to defend all the gaps they might create, we'll need 8 people. If they come out in a formation that has 5 of them close together, we'll need 6 people. And that principle you can apply to a variety of scenarios, even if I've only told you they're only going to come out in 2 and 3 and 4 person formations. Similar in the case of defending in to out. That means that what we're looking to do is, regardless of what formation that the offense come out in, if they do something with the ball or run with the ball, we are looking to force them outwards and never let them go up the middle. Our primary job will be to stop them getting up the middle first, cause them to bounce, and then deal with it outside. That's a principle. And now I don't have to, I will ideally explain to you the variety of scenarios and situations we might see that against. But if there's something that pops up on the day, you know that's the principle we're running, we're all on the same page, and we can now look to defend it. So those are some examples of principles. Now, just to briefly touch on, because it won't be the focus of this, but briefly touch on what the alternative to this is rules. And essentially I'm going to come on to that in the next follow-up video. But I wanted to highlight principles. I know it's quite an abstract concept and it might be challenging for some people to understand from this. But I understand we're going to continue to touch upon it as we go through and show more videos, and more videos will make it more and more obvious. But the key benefit of principles is that, one, it helps you grow your instincts relatively quickly, particularly considering that you don't have as much time to pick up the sport. And it helps accelerate that growth if you understand them rather than rules, particularly because of the fact that here within the UK, it's not people's professions. They don't have hours and hours to watch tape and to show you every single sort of combination that might be. But if you have the understanding of the principles, when you see this new combination, you can quickly assess the situation and know how to act towards it. And then I'll briefly touch on the alternative, which is rules, and we'll come on to that a little bit more later. But cheers for watching. Catch you later. Playmakers Ali over and out.